When server Imani Steele meets billionaire Sullivan Roth at a museum gala, a scandalous photo turns her world upside down. As headlines spread and secrets unravel, will this unexpected connection ruin her or redefine everything? Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you're watching from today. Imani Steele adjusted the black bow tie on her white uniform shirt and looked in the mirror of the staff bathroom. Her dark skin glowed under the harsh fluorescent lights, and she tucked a stray curl back into her tight bun. The catering company had strict rules about appearance. No loose hair, minimal makeup, nothing that would make you stand out to the guests. 5 minutes, everyone, called Marjorie, the catering manager, from outside the door. The guests are arriving. Remember, you are invisible. You are there to serve, not to be seen. Imani took a deep breath. Another night, another wealthy party where people would look through her rather than at her. But the pay was good, $25 an hour plus tips, and her little brother Jamal needed new textbooks for his engineering classes at Chicago State. "You got this," she whispered to herself, pinning her name tag to her chest. Just 6 hours, and that's half of Jamal's books paid for. The Rothwell Museum of Modern Art was buzzing with Chicago's elite. Women in designer gowns that cost more than Imani's yearly rent floated through the marble halls, while men in tailored tuxedos discussed business deals worth millions. Crystal chandeliers cast a golden glow over everyone, making them all look like they belonged in a glossy magazine. Imani picked up a silver tray of champagne flutes and moved smoothly through the crowd. She had learned how to navigate these spaces, how to slide between conversations without interrupting, how to offer drinks without making eye contact, how to become part of the furniture. "I hear Sullivan Roth might actually show up tonight," said a woman in a red dress, taking a champagne flute without acknowledging Imani. "Though I doubt he'll stay long. That man treats these events like a prison sentence." "Well, his father is on the museum board," replied her companion. "Even Sullivan can't avoid family obligation entirely." Imani continued her circuit around the room, the names meaning nothing to her. Rich people talking about other rich people. Meanwhile, she had bills to pay. Her mother's medical debt from her cancer treatment still loomed large, even 2 years after her death. Between that and helping Jamal with college, Imani worked 6 days a week between her day job as a receptionist at a downtown clinic and her evening catering gigs. She was refilling her tray at the service station when Marjorie appeared beside her looking tense. "Sullivan Roth just arrived," she hissed to the staff. "His family donated the new wing. Whatever he wants, he gets. Understand?" The other servers nodded nervously. Imani had no idea who this Sullivan person was, but from everyone's reactions, he must be important. "Matthews, take the East Room. Steele, you cover the main hall. And for God's sake, don't spill anything on anyone." Imani balanced her fresh tray of drinks and returned to the main hall. The crowd had shifted, forming a subtle circle around a new arrival. She couldn't see him clearly, just the backs of people eager to greet him. She moved along the edges of the room, offering champagne to guests who had empty hands. As she rounded a large flower arrangement, she nearly collided with a tall man who had stepped away from the crowd. "I'm so sorry," she said quickly, steadying her tray to prevent the glasses from toppling. "My fault entirely," said a deep voice. Imani looked up and found herself staring into the most intense brown eyes she'd ever seen. The man was striking, tall with broad shoulders, dark hair cut precisely, and a strong jaw that looked like it rarely smiled. His tuxedo fit him perfectly, clearly custom-made for his athletic build, but it was his expression that caught her attention. He looked tired, not physically but soul-tired, like someone who had seen too much of something and not enough of something else. "Can I offer you a drink, sir?" she asked, falling back on her training. He studied her for a moment, his gaze moving to her name tag and then back to her face. "Imani," he said, as if testing her name. "That means faith in Swahili, doesn't it?" She blinked in surprise. "Yes, it does. Not many people know that. I traveled in East Africa for a while." He took a champagne flute from her tray. "Thank you, Imani." Before she could respond, a woman in a dazzling blue gown swooped in. "Sullivan, you actually came. Your father will be thrilled." Sullivan. This must be the Sullivan Roth everyone was talking about. Imani took the opportunity to step back and continue her work, but as she moved through the crowd, she felt his eyes following her. For the next hour, Imani did her job, refilling glasses, clearing empty plates, remaining invisible. But occasionally she would catch Sullivan Roth watching her from across the room. Not in the way rich men sometimes looked at servers, with entitlement or dismissal, but with curiosity, as if she were a puzzle he couldn't quite figure out. At 10 p.m., Imani was carrying a tray of empty glasses back to the kitchen when a hand grabbed her arm, pulling her into an alcove behind a large sculpture. "Hey there, pretty thing," slurred a middle-aged man with red cheeks and alcohol on his breath. "Why don't you take a break and keep me company?" "Sir, I need to get back to work," Imani said firmly, trying to pull away without causing a scene. "Come on, don't be like that." His grip tightened. "I'm a big donor here. I can make things good for you." Imani's heart raced. She knew the drill. Don't antagonize the guests, don't make a scene, don't do anything that might reflect poorly on the catering company. But this man's hand was sliding down her back in a way that made her skin crawl. "I really need to get back to the kitchen, sir," she said, her voice stronger now. "Please let go of my arm." "Is there a problem here?" The cool, commanding voice cut through the air like a knife. Sullivan Roth stood a few feet away, his expression hard as he took in the scene. The drunk man immediately released Imani's arm. "No problem at all, Roth. Just chatting with this lovely server." "Really?" Sullivan's eyebrow raised slightly. "Because it looked to me like the lady was asking you to let her go and you weren't listening." The man's face flushed deeper. "Now, listen here." "No, you listen." Sullivan's voice remained even, but there was steel beneath the surface. "I believe they're announcing the new exhibits in the East Wing. You wouldn't want to miss that, would you, Harrison? Especially since your wife is looking for you." The name drop had an immediate effect. The drunk man straightened his tie, muttered something under his breath and hurried away. Imani released the breath she'd been holding. "Thank you, Mr. Roth." Sullivan's expression softened slightly. "Are you all right?" "Yes, I'm fine. It happens sometimes." She adjusted her grip on the tray. "I should get back to work before my manager notices I'm gone." "Wait." Sullivan glanced around the crowded room, then nodded toward a set of glass doors. "Would you step outside with me for a moment?" Every catering rule said she should decline and return to her duties, but something in his eyes, a genuine concern, not entitlement, made her nod. "Just for a minute," she said. Sullivan led the way through the glass doors onto a stone terrace. The night air was cool on Imani's skin, a welcome relief from the stuffy heat of the crowded gala. String lights twinkled overhead, and the Chicago skyline glittered in the distance. "I wanted to make sure you were really okay," Sullivan said, turning to face her. "Men like Harrison think their money gives them the right to do whatever they want." "It's not the first time something like that has happened," Imani admitted, setting her tray down on a stone ledge. "Part of the job, unfortunately." Sullivan frowned. "It shouldn't be." There was a moment of silence between them, filled only by the muffled sounds of the party inside and the distant hum of city traffic. "Why would someone like you help someone like me?" Imani finally asked, voicing the question that had been puzzling her. Sullivan studied her, his expression thoughtful. "Because you're the only one in that room who doesn't need to perform." "What do you mean?" "Everyone in there is playing a role. Donor, socialite, business connection, they're all putting on a show. But you," his eyes held hers, "you move through that room with a quiet dignity that has nothing to do with impressing anyone. It's refreshing." Imani didn't know how to respond to that. No one had ever seen her that way before. "I should go," she said, picking up her tray again. "Thank you again for stepping in." "Imani," the way he said her name made her pause. "Would you—" Whatever he was about to say was cut short by the terrace doors swinging open. A woman with a camera appeared, her eyes widening as she took in the scene. Sullivan Roth and a server, alone on the moonlit terrace. "Well, well," the woman said, raising her camera. "What do we have here?" The flash went off before either of them could react. "Rita," Sullivan said, his voice suddenly cold, "this is a private conversation." "Is it?" The woman, Rita, smiled like a cat with cream. Sullivan Roth, notorious for avoiding these events, sneaking away with a beautiful server. Seems like a story to me. "It's not what you think," Imani said quickly, panic rising in her chest. "It never is, honey." Rita's eyes flicked to Imani's name tag. "Imani Steele, is it? Tell me, how did you catch the eye of Chicago's most eligible bachelor?" Sullivan stepped between them. "That's enough, Rita. Delete that photo." "You know I can't do that, Sullivan. Gossip is my business." She backed toward the door. "But don't worry, I'll make sure you both look good. Cinderella story and all that." Before either could stop her, Rita disappeared back into the crowd. Imani felt the blood drain from her face. "My manager is going to fire me. We're not supposed to interact with guests like this." Sullivan's jaw tightened. "I'll take care of it. I'll explain what happened." "You don't understand," Imani said, shaking her head. People like me can't afford scandals. I need this job. Her voice cracked slightly. I have responsibilities. For a moment, Sullivan looked like he wanted to say more, to reach out to her, but then his phone buzzed. He glanced at it, and his expression closed off. I have to deal with something, he said, already pulling away. But I'll fix this, Imani, I promise. Then he was gone, leaving Imani alone on the terrace with her tray of empty glasses and a sinking feeling in her stomach. Back inside, Marjorie found her immediately, face pinched with anger. What did you do? She hissed, pulling Imani into a service corridor. Rita Myers just cornered me asking questions about you and Sullivan Roth. Nothing happened, Imani insisted. He helped me with a drunk guest and we stepped outside so I could thank him. That's all. That's all? Marjorie's voice rose. That's Sullivan Roth. His family practically owns half of Chicago, and now Rita Myers, the biggest gossip columnist in the city, is asking if you're his new girlfriend. That's ridiculous. I don't care what happened or didn't happen, Marjorie cut her off. I can't have my servers causing scenes with the clients. You're done for tonight. Turn in your uniform before you leave. Marjorie, please, Imani pleaded. I need this job. My brother should have thought about that before you decided to flirt with Sullivan Roth. Marjorie's expression was unmoved. Clear out your locker. Your final check will be mailed. Imani stood frozen as Marjorie walked away. This couldn't be happening. She had been so careful, had followed all the rules for years, and now, because of one moment of kindness, everything was falling apart. She changed quickly in the staff room, fighting back tears as she hung up her uniform. As she walked through the service exit into the alley behind the museum, she checked her phone, hoping to see a message from Sullivan saying he had fixed things. The screen was empty. Of course it was. Men like Sullivan Roth didn't really see women like her. Whatever connection she thought they'd had was just a momentary distraction for him, and now she was paying the price. The morning headlines confirmed her worst fears. Rita Myers' column featured a blurry but recognizable photo of Imani and Sullivan on the terrace, under the sensational headline, Roth's Secret Server, Billionaire's New Taste. The story was full of innuendo and speculation about how long they'd been seeing each other, whether she was using him for his money, whether she'd been serving him in ways beyond her job description. Imani felt sick as she read it. Her phone had been ringing all morning, other catering companies cancelling her upcoming gigs, her day job manager wanting to talk about her position, and worst of all, Jamal calling to ask what was going on. It's nothing, Jay, she assured her brother. Just a misunderstanding that got blown out of proportion. But they're saying you and Sullivan Roth. It's not true, she said firmly. I served him drinks, that's all. The gossip columnist made up the rest. Then why isn't he saying anything? Jamal asked. If it's not true, why doesn't he just say so? That was the question Imani couldn't answer. Where was Sullivan? Why hadn't he stepped in to stop this, as he'd promised? The answer came 3 days later, when she saw a news alert on her phone. Sullivan Roth departs for London on business. No comment on server scandal. He had disappeared, just like that. Left her to deal with the fallout alone while he jetted off to another continent. Imani sat on the worn couch in her small apartment, staring at the phone. She had lost both her jobs. The rent was due in 2 weeks. Jamal's tuition payment was coming up. And the man who had caused it all, the man who had looked at her with those intense eyes and told her she had dignity, was gone. She allowed herself exactly 5 minutes to cry. Then she dried her tears, opened her laptop, and started searching for new jobs. This setback wouldn't break her. Nothing had so far. Not her father walking out when she was 12, not her mother's long illness and death, not the mountain of medical debt. She was Imani Steele. Her name meant faith, and that's what she would hold on to now, when everything else seemed to be slipping away. What she didn't know was that 3,000 miles away, Sullivan Roth sat in his London hotel room, staring at the same gossip column, with a plan already forming in his mind. Because for the first time in his life, he had met someone real, someone worth coming back for, and Sullivan Roth always got what he wanted. 3 weeks had passed since the gala, and Imani's life had completely unraveled. She sat at her small kitchen table, bills spread out before her, calculator in hand. The numbers weren't adding up, no matter how many times she punched them in. Maybe I can pick up another shift at the grocery store, she muttered to herself. The only job she'd been able to find was stocking shelves overnight at a 24-hour supermarket. It paid minimum wage, nowhere near what she'd been making before. Her phone rang, and Jamal's name flashed on the screen. She took a deep breath before answering. Hey Jay, she said, forcing cheerfulness into her voice. "How's it going, sis?" Jamal asked. "You find anything better than the grocery gig?" "I'm working on it," Imani lied. The truth was that she'd been rejected from 15 jobs in the past week alone. The gossip column had gone viral, and a simple Google search of her name brought up the story and all its ugly implications. No one wanted to hire Sullivan Roth's server girl. "Listen," Jamal said, his voice hesitant, "I've been thinking about taking a semester off. I could get a full-time job, help with the bills until this blows over." "Absolutely not," Imani said firmly. "You're not interrupting your education. I've got this handled." "But no buts, Jay. Mom wanted you to get that engineering degree, and that's what's going to happen." She softened her tone. "I promise I'm okay. Things are tight, but I'm figuring it out." After reassuring Jamal a few more times, Imani hung up and put her head in her hands. She wasn't sure how much longer she could keep up the brave front. The rent was due in 3 days, and she was still short $400. Her savings were gone, used up on groceries and the minimum payments on her mother's medical bills. A knock at the door startled her. She wasn't expecting anyone, and her neighbors rarely visited. Cautiously, she peered through the peephole. Her heart stopped. Sullivan Roth stood in her hallway wearing jeans and a simple grey sweater instead of his tuxedo. He looked different, his hair slightly longer, a shadow of stubble on his jaw, but those intense eyes were the same. Imani's first instinct was to ignore him, to pretend she wasn't home, but anger bubbled up inside her, pushing her to fling open the door. "What are you doing here?" she demanded. Sullivan looked momentarily taken aback by her directness. "I came to apologize," he said simply. "It's been 3 weeks," Imani said, crossing her arms. 3 weeks of my life falling apart, while you were off in London doing whatever billionaires do." "I know." His eyes held genuine regret. "May I come in? I'd rather not have this conversation in the hallway." Imani hesitated, then stepped aside. Her tiny apartment suddenly felt even smaller, with Sullivan's tall frame filling the space. She was acutely aware of the worn furniture, the water stain on the ceiling, the bills scattered across her table. "How did you find me?" she asked, quickly gathering the bills and shoving them into a drawer. "I hired someone," Sullivan admitted. "I know that sounds intrusive, but I needed to find you, and you weren't exactly listed in the phone book. So you've been in London this whole time?" Imani didn't bother hiding the bitterness in her voice. "Yes and no." Sullivan ran a hand through his hair, a surprisingly human gesture for someone who always seemed so controlled. "Physically, yes, but mentally, I've been right here thinking about what happened, about what I let happen to you." "You promised you'd fix it," Imani said quietly. "You said those exact words and then you disappeared." "I know." Sullivan took a step toward her, then stopped when she stiffened. "I handled it wrong. All of it. I panicked." "You panicked?" Imani gave a short, humorless laugh. "I lost both my jobs. I can't get hired anywhere decent because of that story. I'm about to be evicted, but poor billionaire Sullivan Roth panicked, so I guess that makes it okay." Sullivan winced. "I deserve that, but I want to make it right." He reached into his pocket and pulled out an envelope. "This should cover any income you've lost, plus enough to get you through the next few months while this blows over." Imani stared at the envelope, then back at him, fury rising in her throat. "So that's why you're here? To throw money at the problem? To buy off the poor little server whose life you ruined?" "No, that's not—" "Get out!" Imani pointed to the door, her hand shaking. "I don't want your guilt money." "Imani, please listen," Sullivan said, not moving toward the door. "The money isn't to buy you off, it's because I feel responsible for what happened to you. But that's not why I came back." "Then why did you?" Sullivan looked at her, and for a moment, his carefully controlled facade cracked. "Because I haven't been able to stop thinking about you, about what you said to me, about how you looked at me, like I was just a person, not a Roth, not a billionaire, just me." Imani faltered, unprepared for his honesty. "Do you know what my life is like?" he continued. "Every person I meet wants something from me. My money, my connections, my name. Every relationship I've had has been a transaction, until I met you." "You don't even know me," Imani said, though some of the anger had left her voice. "I know enough," Sullivan replied. "I know you work multiple jobs to support your brother through college. I know you're still paying off your mother's medical bills 2 years after her death. I know you've never missed a rent payment until now, and that terrifies you because you promised Jamal he'd always have a home to come back to." Imani stared at him. "How do you know all that?" "Like I said, I hired someone, but more importantly, I know that when I helped you that night, you didn't ask who I was or what I could do for you. You just asked why I would help you, as if you couldn't imagine someone seeing your worth. His words hung in the air between them, uncomfortably close to the truth. I'd like a chance to start over, Sullivan said finally. No cameras, no gossip columnists, just coffee, a conversation, a chance for me to apologize properly and for us to get to know each other. Imani wanted to say no. Everything logical in her brain was screaming at her to show him the door. But something in his eyes, a vulnerability that seemed at odds with his powerful presence, made her hesitate. One coffee, she said finally, and I'm still not taking your money. A smile flickered across Sullivan's face, transforming his features. That's fair. Tomorrow morning? There's a place called Millie's about 2 blocks from here. Imani raised an eyebrow. You know my local coffee shop too? I did my research, he admitted. 10 o'clock? Fine. 10 o'clock. After Sullivan left, Imani leaned against the closed door, heart racing. What was she doing? The man had upended her life, disappeared when she needed him, and now she was agreeing to have coffee with him. Yet she couldn't deny the connection she'd felt on that terrace, a moment of seeing and being seen that had felt utterly genuine. The next morning, Imani dressed carefully in her best jeans and a simple blue sweater that her mother had always said brought out the warmth in her brown skin. She told herself she wasn't dressing up for Sullivan. She just wanted to look put together, dignified. Millie's was busy with the mid-morning crowd when she arrived. She spotted Sullivan immediately, sitting in a corner booth. He'd dressed down again. Dark jeans and a navy button-down shirt, no tie. Without the trappings of wealth, he looked almost normal. You came, he said, standing as she approached the table. Relief colored his voice. I said I would. Imani slid into the booth. I'm a woman of my word. The barb landed and Sullivan nodded, accepting it. I deserve that. Can I get you something? Coffee, breakfast? Just coffee is fine. When the waitress had taken their order, an awkward silence fell between them. Sullivan was the first to break it. I want to explain what happened after the gala, he said. Not to excuse it, but so you understand. Imani nodded, giving him permission to continue. When Rita took that photo, I knew it would cause trouble, Sullivan began. But I thought I could contain it, have my PR team issue a statement, make it clear nothing inappropriate happened. But then my father called. Sullivan's expression darkened. My father controls the family business. He's traditional, image-obsessed. When he heard about the photo, he assumed I'd been caught in a compromising position with the help. Imani winced at the term, and Sullivan quickly added, his words, not mine. He ordered me to London for an emergency meeting with our European partners, essentially removing me from the situation until the story died down. And you just went along with it? Imani asked. At first, yes, Sullivan admitted. It's what I've always done. Followed his lead, played by his rules. The family business comes first, personal feelings second. But while I was there, I couldn't stop thinking about you. About the look on your face when Rita took that photo. You knew immediately what it would mean for you, and I just left. Their coffees arrived, giving Sullivan a moment to collect himself. 3 days ago, I walked out of a board meeting in London. My father was furious. I told him I was going back to Chicago to fix my mistake. Sullivan looked directly at Imani. Not the mistake of being seen with you, but the mistake of not standing by you afterward. And what did he say to that? He threatened to cut me off, remove me from the company. Sullivan's mouth curved in a wry smile. He's used that threat since I was 20. It used to terrify me. This time I realized I didn't care. Imani took a sip of her coffee, processing his words. So what happens now? You've apologized. We're having coffee. Is your conscience clear? No, Sullivan said firmly. My conscience won't be clear until you're back on your feet, until the damage I caused is fixed. I told you I don't want your money. Not money, Sullivan clarified. Connections, opportunities. I know people all over this city. Let me help you find a new job, something better than what you had before. Imani narrowed her eyes. I don't need charity. It's not charity. It's reparation. Sullivan leaned forward. Look, you're smart, capable, hardworking. Anyone would be lucky to have you. All I'm offering is to open a few doors. You'll walk through them on your own merit. Imani wanted to refuse on principle, but Jamal's tuition was due and her rent was late, and pride wouldn't keep a roof over their heads. I'll think about it, she said finally. Sullivan seemed to recognize that was the best he was going to get. He nodded, then reached into his pocket and pulled out a business card with his personal number written on the back. When you decide, he said, sliding it across the table. No pressure. Their coffee stretched into an hour, then 2. Despite her reservations, Imani found herself drawn into conversation with Sullivan. He asked about Jamal, about her mother, about her dreams before life had forced her to be practical. He listened, really listened, in a way few people ever had. In turn, he told her about growing up as the heir to the Roth fortune, about the constant pressure to be perfect, about his mother's death when he was 14, and how his father had become even more demanding afterward. "I've spent my whole life playing a role," Sullivan admitted. "The perfect son, the ruthless businessman. I'm so used to performing that sometimes I'm not sure who I really am anymore." "Is that why you noticed me at the gala?" Imani asked. "Because I wasn't performing." Sullivan's eyes met hers. "Yes, you moved through that room with such authenticity. It was like spotting a real person in a room full of mannequins." The honesty in his gaze made something flutter in Imani's chest. She quickly looked down at her empty coffee cup. "I should go," she said. "I have the night shift at the grocery store." Sullivan nodded, not pushing for more time. As they stood to leave, he said, "Thank you for giving me a chance to explain. I know I don't deserve it." Outside the coffee shop, they paused on the sidewalk. The October air was crisp, carrying the scent of fallen leaves. "I meant what I said about helping you find a job," Sullivan said. "No strings attached." Imani studied his face, looking for any sign of deception or ulterior motive. She found none, just a sincere desire to make amends. "I'll call you," she said finally. She did call, 3 days later, when her landlord left a final eviction warning on her door. Pride was one thing, homelessness was another. Sullivan answered on the first ring. "Imani," he said, her name warm in his voice. "I was hoping you'd call." "I've been thinking about your offer," she said, cutting to the chase. "I'd appreciate any help finding a job, but I need to be clear about something. This isn't me agreeing to anything else." "Of course not," Sullivan said quickly. "This is just me trying to right a wrong, nothing more." But they both knew, even then, that it was already something more. The next week passed in a whirlwind. Sullivan arranged interviews for Imani at 3 different companies: an art gallery looking for an office manager, a non-profit organization needing an executive assistant, and a boutique hotel seeking a guest relations coordinator. All offered salaries significantly higher than what she'd been making before. Imani chose the non-profit, Project Future, an organization that provided college scholarships to low-income students. The work resonated with her own struggles to help Jamal through school. "Are you sure?" Sullivan asked when she told him her decision. They were walking through Grant Park, something that had become a habit in the week since their coffee. The hotel position paid more. "It's not always about the money," Imani said. "I want to do something meaningful." Sullivan looked at her with that same expression from the gala, as if she were a rare creature he couldn't quite believe existed. "What?" she asked, self-conscious under his gaze. "Most people I know would take the highest paying offer without hesitation," he said. "You continue to surprise me, Imani Steele." As October turned to November, Imani settled into her new job. She was good at it, organized, efficient, compassionate with the students who came through their doors. Her boss, Dr. Eleanor Washington, quickly came to rely on her, and though she tried to fight it, Sullivan was becoming a regular part of her life. What had started as coffee to discuss job opportunities evolved into dinner to celebrate her new position, then weekend walks in the park, then phone calls that stretched late into the night. She learned that beneath his controlled exterior was a man with a dry sense of humor, a passion for architecture, and a surprising knowledge of poetry. He learned about her love of cooking, her dream of someday opening a small cafe, her habit of singing loudly and badly while cleaning her apartment. "My father's been calling," Sullivan told her one evening as they sat on a bench overlooking Lake Michigan. "He wants me back in London to finish the deals I walked out on." Imani felt a cold weight settle in her stomach. "Are you going?" "I told him I'd think about it," Sullivan said, watching a sailboat drift across the water. "But the truth is, I don't want to leave. Not when—" He didn't finish the sentence, but his hand found hers on the bench between them, fingers intertwining with a gentle pressure that said what words couldn't yet. Imani knew she should pull away. Sullivan Roth lived in a world she could never belong in, a world of private jets and billion-dollar deals, of galas and gossip columns, a world where people like her served drinks and remained invisible. But when he looked at her, she didn't feel invisible. She felt seen, truly seen, perhaps for the first time in her life. "Sullivan," she began, not sure what she was going to say. His phone rang, interrupting the moment. He glanced at the screen and frowned. "It's my father," he said. "I should take this." He stepped away to answer, and Imani watched his back stiffen as he listened to whatever his father was saying. When he returned, his expression was troubled. "What is it?" she asked. "He's coming to Chicago," Sullivan said. "Tomorrow. He says he wants to discuss my situation in person." "What situation?" Sullivan's eyes met hers. "Us." The word hung between them, a simple syllable that somehow contained worlds of complication. "There is no us," Imani said automatically, even as her hand remained in his. Sullivan's fingers tightened around hers. "Isn't there?" Before she could answer, a voice called out Sullivan's name. They both turned to see a woman approaching, camera in hand, Rita Myers. "Well, well," the gossip columnist said, her smile predatory. "I guess the rumors are true. Sullivan Roth and his server girl, still going strong." Sullivan stood, placing himself between Rita and Imani. "Leave us alone, Rita." "Can't do that, Sullivan. This is quite the story, the billionaire and the waitress. Very pretty woman." She raised her camera. "How about a statement? Is this a fling or something more serious?" "There's no story here," Sullivan said firmly. "Just two people enjoying the park." "Two people holding hands," Rita countered. "Very cozy. What would your father say? Or the board? I'm sure they'd love to know you're still seeing the help." Imani stood, anger flaring. "I'm not the help. I have a name." "Of course you do, honey," Rita said, not even looking at her. "Imani Steele, right? Tell me, what's it like dating one of Chicago's richest men, planning to upgrade from that little apartment in South Shore?" "That's enough." Sullivan's voice was like ice. "Write whatever garbage you want, Rita. But if you harass Imani again, I'll have my lawyers on you so fast your head will spin. Understand?" Rita's smile faltered slightly. "Just doing my job, Sullivan. Find another story. This one's off limits." Something in his tone must have convinced her, because Rita backed away, though not without one last jab. "See you tomorrow at your father's welcome dinner. I'm sure he'll have plenty to say about your new friend." When she was gone, Imani pulled her hand from Sullivan's. "This is exactly why there can't be an us," she said quietly. "Your world and mine don't mix. People like her will always see me as the server girl trying to climb the social ladder." "I don't care what people like Rita think," Sullivan said, "and neither should you. It's easy for you to say that. You're Sullivan Roth. I'm nobody." "Don't say that." Sullivan's voice was fierce. "You're not nobody. You're everything." The intensity in his eyes made Imani step back. "Sullivan, be realistic. Your father is coming to town specifically to deal with whatever this is. He clearly doesn't approve." "I don't need his approval. Don't you?" Imani challenged. "You've spent your whole life trying to please him, to be the perfect heir. Are you really ready to walk away from all that for what? A woman you barely know?" Sullivan reached for her hand again, but Imani kept it at her side. "I think we need some space," she said. "Your father is coming tomorrow. You should focus on that. Figure out what you really want." "I already know what I want," Sullivan said, his eyes never leaving hers. But Imani shook her head. "Take some time, Sullivan. This isn't a fairy tale. Real life is more complicated." She turned and walked away, feeling his eyes on her back. As much as it hurt to leave, she knew it was the right decision, because the truth was, she was falling for Sullivan Roth, falling hard and fast. And that terrified her more than any gossip column ever could, because when you're nobody, loving somebody means having everything to lose. Imani spent a restless night, replaying her conversation with Sullivan over and over in her mind. His words echoed in her thoughts. "You're everything." No one had ever spoken to her that way before, with such conviction, such certainty. But reality was a cold companion in the dark hours. Sullivan lived in a world she could only glimpse from the edges, serving drinks and remaining unnoticed. And now his father was coming to handle the situation. She knew what that meant. Men like Maxwell Roth didn't let their billionaire heirs end up with women who stocked grocery shelves. Her phone buzzed with a text from Sullivan. "Can we talk before my father arrives, please?" Imani stared at the message for a long time before typing, "I have to work. Maybe tomorrow." It wasn't entirely a lie. She did have work at Project Future, but not until the afternoon. The truth was she needed space to think clearly, away from Sullivan's intense gaze and the way her heart raced when he was near. She was brewing coffee when Jamal called. "Have you seen it?" he asked without preamble. "Seen what?" "The new article. About you and Sullivan Roth. It's everywhere, Imani." Imani's stomach dropped. She quickly opened her laptop and searched her name. The latest Rita Myers column appeared, featuring a photo of her and Sullivan on the park bench, hands intertwined. The headline blared, "Roth server still serving. Billionaire can't quit waitress romance. This is bad, isn't it? Jamal said, still on the phone. It's complicated, Imani replied, scanning the article. Rita had painted her as a gold digger who had sunk her claws into one of Chicago's most eligible bachelors. The piece ended with a pointed mention of Maxwell Roth's arrival in Chicago that day, suggesting he was coming specifically to end his son's inappropriate dalliance. Imani, what's really going on with you and this guy? Jamal asked, concern evident in his voice. She sighed, closing the laptop. I honestly don't know, Jay. We've been spending time together. He helped me get the job at Project Future, but it's not what these articles make it sound like. But you like him, Jamal said. It wasn't a question. It doesn't matter if I do, Imani said firmly. His father's flying in today to put a stop to whatever this is. And maybe that's for the best. People like us don't end up with people like them, Jay. That's just how the world works. Since when do you accept how the world works? Jamal challenged. You've been fighting the system your whole life. Fighting for me, for Mum when she was sick. Why stop now? This is different. Is it? Or are you just scared? Imani was saved from answering by a knock at her door. Someone's here. I'll call you later, okay? She hung up and approached the door cautiously, half expecting to find Sullivan on the other side. Instead, when she opened it, she found a tall, elegant black woman in a tailored suit. Imani Steele, the woman asked, her voice crisp and professional. Yes? My name is Victoria Lane. I'm Sullivan Roth's personal attorney. She held out a business card. May I come in? I'd like to discuss a matter of some importance. Bewildered, Imani stepped aside to let her enter. Victoria glanced around the small apartment with a neutral expression before taking a seat at the kitchen table. Mr. Roth asked me to speak with you regarding the recent publicity surrounding your acquaintance with him. Sullivan sent you? Imani asked, confused. This wasn't what she had expected. Not exactly, Victoria said, opening her briefcase. Sullivan doesn't know I'm here. This visit is at the request of his father, Maxwell Roth. Imani's blood ran cold. I see. Mr. Roth, Maxwell that is concerned about the nature of your relationship with his son. He believes it may be detrimental to both Sullivan's personal reputation and the Roth family business interests. And he sent you to tell me to stay away, Imani guessed, anger beginning to simmer beneath her calm exterior. Victoria's expression remained professional. Mr. Roth has authorized me to offer you a settlement. She slid a document across the table. In exchange for agreeing to end all contact with Sullivan and signing a non-disclosure agreement about your interactions with him, Roth Enterprises will provide you with a sum of $500,000. Imani stared at the document, then at Victoria, disbelief giving way to fury. He's trying to buy me off? Mr. Roth prefers to think of it as compensation for the inconvenience and unwanted publicity you've experienced, Victoria said smoothly. The amount is negotiable, of course. Imani stood, picking up the document. For a moment, she was tempted to tear it to pieces. $500,000 would pay off her mother's medical debt. It would see Jamal through college and graduate school. It would set her up for years to come. But it would also mean admitting that she was exactly what Rita Myers had called her, a gold digger looking for a payday. Please tell Maxwell Roth that I'm not for sale, Imani said, handing the document back to Victoria. And you can tell him that if he wants to discuss his son's personal life, he should talk to his son, not send lawyers to bribe the help. Victoria's professional mask slipped for just a moment, revealing something that looked almost like approval. She returned the document to her briefcase. I'll convey your response, she said, standing. Though I should warn you, Maxwell Roth isn't accustomed to hearing the word no. Neither am I, Imani replied, showing her to the door. After Victoria left, Imani's hands were shaking. She had just turned down more money than she would likely see in a decade. But beneath the shock, she felt something else. A fierce pride. Maxwell Roth had tried to put a price tag on her, and she had refused to be purchased. Her phone buzzed with another text from Sullivan. My father's plane lands at noon. I need to see you before then, please. This time, Imani replied, I'll meet you at Millie's in an hour. Sullivan was already waiting when she arrived, hands wrapped around a coffee mug, tension evident in the set of his shoulders. When he saw her, his face lit up, only to darken again as he registered her expression. What's wrong? He asked as she slid into the booth across from him. Your father sent his lawyer to see me this morning, Imani said without preamble. Victoria Lane. She offered me $500,000 to disappear from your life. Sullivan's face drained of color. He did what? Apparently I'm bad for the family image. Imani's tone was light, but her eyes were serious. Your father wants to solve the problem before it gets worse. I'll kill him, Sullivan muttered, his hands clenching into fists on the table. I can't believe he would. Actually, I can believe it. This is exactly the kind of thing he would do. Did you know he was planning this? Of course not. Sullivan's voice rose, causing several nearby customers to glance their way. He lowered his voice. Imani, you have to believe me. I had no idea he would approach you like this. She studied his face, finding only genuine shock and anger there. I believe you. What did you tell her? He asked. Victoria. I told her I wasn't for sale, Imani said simply. Something shifted in Sullivan's expression. Surprise, followed by a warmth that made Imani's heart skip. You turned down $500,000. Is that so hard to believe? For most people, yes, Sullivan said, reaching across the table for her hand. This time she didn't pull away. But for you? No. You're different, Imani. You've always been different. The way he looked at her made it hard to breathe. Sullivan, we need to be realistic. Your father is clearly willing to go to extreme lengths to keep us apart. And maybe he's right. We come from completely different worlds. I don't care about that, Sullivan said fiercely. I care about you, about how I feel when I'm with you, like I can finally be myself, not who everyone expects me to be. And what happens when the novelty wears off? Imani asked, the question that had been haunting her. When you realize that my world is small and ordinary compared to yours? Your world isn't small, Sullivan countered. It's real, it's honest. Do you know what my world is like? It's all performance and pretense. Everyone wants something from me. Everyone has an agenda except you. His thumb traced circles on the back of her hand, sending shivers up her arm. The day we met, you asked why someone like me would help someone like you. The truth is, you helped me. You reminded me that there's more to life than board meetings and balance sheets. You made me feel human again. Imani wanted to believe him, wanted it so badly it scared her. Your father's plane lands at noon, she said softly. What are you going to tell him? The truth, Sullivan said, that I've met someone extraordinary, and I'm not going to let his prejudice or his money or his threats come between us. He could cut you off, Imani reminded him. Take away your position in the company. Sullivan's smile was surprisingly carefree. Let him try. After coffee, Sullivan insisted on driving Imani to work, though Project Future was only a few blocks away. As they pulled up to the modern glass building, he turned to her. Have dinner with me tonight, he said. My father's hosting a welcome dinner at the penthouse. I want you there. Imani's eyes widened. You want me to meet your father? After he just tried to buy me off? Especially after that, Sullivan said, determination hardening his features. I want him to see who you really are, not who he assumes you are. Sullivan, I don't think... Please, Imani. His hand found hers again. I need you there. The intensity in his eyes made it impossible to refuse. What time? I'll pick you up at 7. All afternoon. Imani struggled to focus on her work. Doctor, Washington noticed her distraction during their weekly staff meeting. Everything all right, Imani? She asked when the other staff had filed out. You seem a million miles away today. I'm sorry, Imani said. I've got a lot on my mind. Dr. Washington, a statuesque woman in her 60s with silver locks and keen eyes, studied her thoughtfully. Would this have anything to do with the articles I've been seeing about you and Sullivan Roth? Imani winced. You've seen those. Hard to miss, Dr. Washington said with a slight smile. Should I be concerned that my new executive assistant is about to run off with a billionaire? No, Imani said quickly. It's not. We're not. She sighed. It's complicated. Most worthwhile things are, Dr. Washington observed. For what it's worth, I know Sullivan. He's done considerable work with our scholarship fund over the years. He's one of the good ones. Imani looked up in surprise. You know him? This is a small city in some ways, especially in philanthropic circles, Dr. Washington said. And contrary to what you might be thinking, Sullivan's recommendation wasn't why I hired you. You got this job on your own merits. Relief flooded through Imani. Thank you for telling me that. Just one piece of advice, Dr. Washington added as she gathered her papers. In my experience, the heart knows what it wants long before the head is willing to admit it. Don't let fear make your decisions for you. At 7 o'clock sharp, Sullivan's sleek black car pulled up in front of Imani's apartment building. She had spent 2 hours getting ready, finally settling on a simple emerald green dress, the nicest thing she owned, purchased for her mother's funeral. She had pulled her hair into an elegant updo and applied minimal makeup, aiming for dignified rather than flashy. Sullivan's eyes widened when she opened the door. You look beautiful, he said, the simple sincerity in his voice making her blush. Is this okay for dinner with your father? She asked, suddenly nervous. It's perfect, Sullivan assured her. You're perfect. The drive to the Gold Coast took 20 minutes. Sullivan filled the time telling her about his meeting with his father earlier that day. He was furious about Victoria's report, Sullivan said, a hint of satisfaction in his voice. He couldn't believe you turned down the money. I think it's the first time in decades someone has said no to him. How did he react when you told him I was coming to dinner? Imani asked. Sullivan's smile was wry. Let's just say he's looking forward to meeting you. The Roth penthouse occupied the top 2 floors of one of Chicago's most exclusive residential buildings. A uniformed doorman greeted them by name as Sullivan led Imani into a private elevator. She tried not to show her nervousness as they ascended to the 60th floor, but Sullivan must have sensed it because he squeezed her hand reassuringly. Remember, he said quietly, you belong here just as much as anyone. The elevator opened directly into a stunning foyer with marble floors and a crystal chandelier. A butler appeared immediately to take Imani's wrap. Mr. Sullivan, he said with a slight bow, your father and the other guests are in the main salon. Sullivan kept his hand at the small of Imani's back as they walked through the penthouse. She tried not to gawk at the obvious wealth on display. The original artwork on the walls, the antique furniture, the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Chicago skyline. The main salon was a large, elegantly appointed room with several seating areas and a grand piano in one corner. About a dozen people were gathered, drinks in hand, engaged in conversation. As Sullivan and Imani entered, a hush fell over the room. A tall, imposing man with silver hair and Sullivan's intense eyes detached himself from a group and approached them. Maxwell Roth was handsome in a severe way, with the bearing of someone accustomed to commanding attention. Sullivan, he said, his voice cool, I see you've brought a guest. Father, this is Imani Steele, Sullivan said, his arm moving protectively around Imani's waist. Imani, my father, Maxwell Roth. Imani extended her hand. It's a pleasure to meet you, Mr. Roth, though I believe your lawyer and I have already been introduced. Maxwell's eyebrows rose slightly at her directness, but he took her hand in a brief, firm shake. Ms. Steele, Sullivan has told me very little about you, actually. Then perhaps we'll have a chance to remedy that over dinner, Imani replied, meeting his gaze steadily. A flicker of something, surprise, perhaps respect, crossed Maxwell's face before he turned to Sullivan. The Prestons were asking about the Singapore project. You should say hello. It was a dismissal, but Sullivan didn't move. Father, Imani and I will greet the other guests together. For a moment, father and son locked eyes in a silent battle of wills. Then Maxwell smiled thinly. Of course. Do make the rounds. Dinner will be served in 30 minutes. As Maxwell walked away, Imani released the breath she hadn't realized she was holding. I think that went well? Sullivan's tense expression relaxed into a genuine smile. You were amazing. I've never seen anyone stand up to him like that. Over the next half hour, Sullivan introduced Imani to the other guests, business associates, family friends, and a few of Chicago's social elite. Some were openly curious about her, others barely concealed their disdain. Through it all, Sullivan remained at her side, his hand never leaving hers. Rita Myers was there too, covering the event for her column. Her eyes gleamed with malicious delight when she spotted Imani. The server girl, elevated to dinner guest, she remarked, loud enough for nearby guests to hear. How progressive of the Roths. Before Imani could respond, a woman's voice cut in. Rather reductive, isn't it, Rita? Ms. Steele is the executive assistant at Project Future, one of Chicago's most respected educational non-profits. Perhaps you could refer to her by her name and position, rather than her previous employment. Victoria Lane stood behind them, elegant in a deep purple dress, her expression coolly professional but her eyes sharp with warning. Rita faltered, clearly not expecting pushback from Sullivan's father's attorney. I was merely noting the unusual circumstances of their acquaintance. There's nothing unusual about two people meeting and connecting, Victoria replied. Unless, of course, you're suggesting that people should only associate with those of similar backgrounds, a rather outdated and elitist perspective, wouldn't you say? Rita's smile turned brittle. Of course not, I'm simply doing my job, reporting on what interests my readers. Then perhaps you might interest them in the actual good work Ms. Steele does at Project Future, rather than recycling tired Cinderella narratives, Victoria suggested, before turning to Imani. Ms. Steele, I believe we have some unfinished business to discuss. Would you join me for a moment? Confused but grateful for the rescue, Imani followed Victoria to a quiet corner of the room. "Thank you for that," she said, "though I'm surprised you'd defend me, considering this morning." Victoria's lips curved in a slight smile. "I represent Maxwell Roth's legal interests, not his prejudices. For what it's worth, I respected your response this morning. Integrity is rare in these circles." "Is that why you wanted to speak with me? To tell me that?" "Partly," Victoria admitted, "but also to warn you. Maxwell won't give up easily. He's used to getting his way, especially when it comes to Sullivan. Tonight is a test. He's watching to see if you'll embarrass yourself, give him ammunition to use against you." "Why are you telling me this?" Imani asked. "Aren't you on his side?" "I'm on the side of what's best for the Roth family," Victoria said, "and having observed Sullivan over the years, I've never seen him stand up to his father the way he has since meeting you. That suggests to me that perhaps you are what's best for him." Before Imani could respond, a chime sounded, signaling dinner. Sullivan appeared at her side, offering his arm. "Everything okay?" he asked, glancing between her and Victoria. "Just a friendly chat," Victoria said smoothly, moving away to join the other guests heading toward the dining room. The dining room featured a long table that could seat 20, set with fine china and crystal. Maxwell took his place at the head, with Sullivan at the opposite end. Imani found herself seated halfway down, between Victoria and an older gentleman who was introduced as Judge Harrington, a family friend. As servers, actual servers, not unlike what Imani had been just weeks ago, brought out the first course, Maxwell stood and raised his glass. "Welcome, friends. It's good to be back in Chicago, however briefly. As you know, we're in a critical phase of our expansion into Asian markets. The Singapore deal alone represents a 20% increase in our global portfolio." He paused, his gaze settling on Sullivan. "My son was supposed to be finalizing these deals in London. Instead, he chose to return to Chicago to address personal matters, but I'm confident he'll be returning to London with me tomorrow to complete what he started." The statement hung in the air, a challenge directed at Sullivan. The guests shifted uncomfortably, aware of the tension between father and son. Sullivan set down his fork and stood, raising his own glass. "To my father's safe arrival," he said smoothly, "and to new beginnings, both professional and personal." His eyes found Imani's across the table, sending a clear message to everyone present. This was more than a casual dinner guest, this was a declaration. Maxwell's smile remained fixed, but his eyes hardened. "Indeed, to new beginnings." Throughout dinner, Imani found herself the subject of not-so-subtle interrogation from Maxwell and several of his closest associates. Where had she grown up? South Shore. Where had she attended college? Chicago State on scholarship, though she'd had to drop out when her mother got sick. What were her career aspirations? Currently focused on her work at Project Future, she answered each question directly, refusing to apologize for her background or pretend to be something she wasn't. Across the table, she could see Sullivan watching her with a mixture of pride and concern. After the main course, Maxwell turned his attention directly to her. "Tell me, Ms. Steele, what exactly are your intentions regarding my son?" The table fell silent. Even the servers paused in their movements. "Father," Sullivan warned, his voice tight. "It's a fair question," Maxwell said. "After all, Sullivan has walked away from critical business negotiations, risked his position in the company, all for what exactly?" Imani set down her water glass carefully. "Mr. Roth, I understand your concern. From your perspective, I must seem like an opportunist, someone taking advantage of your son's position and wealth." "The thought had occurred," Maxwell acknowledged dryly. "Then, let me be clear," Imani continued, meeting his gaze. "I didn't ask Sullivan to come back from London. I didn't ask him to help me find a job, and I certainly didn't ask him to bring me here tonight. In fact, if it were up to me, I would have declined your dinner invitation, since you already made your opinion of me quite clear this morning." Murmurs rippled around the table. Maxwell's expression darkened. "I was merely offering compensation for the inconvenience." "You were trying to buy me off," Imani corrected him, her voice steady. "Which suggests you think I have a price. I don't. Whatever is happening between Sullivan and me has nothing to do with your money or your company or your social standing. It's about two people who see each other clearly in a world full of masks and pretense." She stood, placing her napkin beside her plate. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I think I've had enough hospitality for one evening." Without waiting for a response, she walked out of the dining room, head high, heart pounding. She had just publicly stood up to one of the most powerful men in Chicago. Part of her wanted to run straight to the elevator, but she made herself walk calmly through the salon toward the foyer. Behind her, she could hear chairs scraping as someone, Sullivan most likely, got up to follow her. But it was Victoria who reached her first. That was quite an exit, the attorney said, keeping pace with her. Maxwell isn't used to people walking out on him. First time for everything, Imani replied, not slowing down. For what it's worth, you just did what many people in that room have wanted to do for years, Victoria said, including me on occasion. They reached the foyer, and Imani turned to face her. Why are you being nice to me? This morning you were offering me money to stay away from Sullivan. I was doing my job, Victoria corrected. Personally and professionally, those are different things. And personally, I think Sullivan needs someone who isn't afraid to stand up to his father. The Roth men tend to surround themselves with yes people. Imani, Sullivan's voice called from behind them. He strode into the foyer, concern etched on his features. Are you okay? I'm fine, she assured him. But I think I've overstayed my welcome. I'm coming with you, Sullivan said immediately. Sullivan, you can't just leave in the middle of your father's dinner, Imani protested. Watch me, he replied, already signaling to the butler to bring their coats. Victoria cleared her throat. If I might make a suggestion, Ms. Steele, perhaps you could wait in the library while Sullivan and his father have a necessary conversation. It would be more strategic than both of you walking out now. Sullivan hesitated, clearly torn between staying to confront his father and leaving with Imani. She's right, Imani said softly. You need to talk to him. I'll wait. Sullivan took her hands in his. Are you sure? I'm sure. Go. After Sullivan returned to the dining room, Victoria led Imani to the library, a warm, wood-paneled room lined with bookshelves and featuring a crackling fireplace. He'll come for you when he's ready, Victoria said, before leaving Imani alone with her thoughts. Alone in the quiet of the library, surrounded by leather-bound books and the soft glow of firelight, Imani had time to process the events of the evening. She had walked into the lion's den, Maxwell Roth's territory, and refused to be intimidated. More surprisingly, she had found an unexpected ally in Victoria Lane. But what would happen now? Sullivan had made his feelings clear, standing up to his father in front of all his guests. But would he really risk everything? His inheritance, his position, his entire world, for her? And if he did, could she bear the responsibility of being the reason he lost it all? 20 minutes later, the library door opened. Imani turned, expecting Sullivan, but found Maxwell Roth instead. He entered slowly, closing the door behind him. My son is quite angry with me, he said without preamble. He's threatening to resign from the company if I don't, as he puts it, accept his choices. Imani stood facing him squarely. I never asked him to do that. I believe you, Maxwell said, surprising her. He moved to a cabinet and poured 2 glasses of amber liquid. Scotch? When Imani shook her head, he set 1 glass aside and took a seat in a leather armchair, gesturing for her to sit as well. After a moment's hesitation, she did. You refused $500,000 this morning, Maxwell said, studying her over the rim of his glass. A substantial sum for most people. I'm not most people, Imani replied. No, you're not, he agreed. Most people in your position would have taken the money, or at least tried to negotiate for more. You didn't even consider it. Because I'm not interested in your money, Mr. Roth. So my son claims. Maxwell sipped his scotch. But everyone wants something, Ms. Steele. If not money, then what? Power? Status? The Roth name? Imani's patience snapped. Has it occurred to you that maybe I just care about your son? The actual person, not his bank account or his last name. In my experience, your experience is with people in your world, Imani interrupted. People who were raised to see relationships as transactions, marriages as mergers. That's not my world. Where I come from, people love each other because of who they are, not what they can provide. Maxwell studied her for a long moment. Sullivan says the same thing about you, that you see him not his position or his wealth, that you call him on his, what was the phrase? Rich boy nonsense. Despite herself, Imani smiled. Someone has to. He also says you've changed him, made him question things he's always taken for granted. Maxwell set down his glass, including his role in the family business. I've never encouraged him to leave the company, Imani said quickly. Perhaps not directly. Maxwell leaned forward. But your very existence in his life represents an alternative, a world outside the one I've built for him, a world where he doesn't have to be Sullivan Roth, heir to the Roth fortune, but just Sullivan. The insight surprised her. And you see that as a threat? I see it as a reality I need to adapt to, Maxwell corrected. Sullivan has made it abundantly clear that you are non-negotiable, so here we are. Where exactly is that? Imani asked cautiously. Maxwell stood straightening his cuffs. A compromise. Sullivan will return to London with me tomorrow to complete the Singapore negotiations, something he was responsible for before he abruptly left. 2 weeks, no longer. In exchange, I will withhold judgment about his personal life. That's between you and Sullivan, Imani said. It doesn't involve me. Oh, but it does, Maxwell replied, because my son seems to think he needs your blessing to fulfill his professional obligations. He's waiting outside this door right now, ready to throw away a decade of work if you give the slightest indication that you object to his leaving. Imani felt the weight of his words. Sullivan was putting her before his family legacy, his responsibilities, his entire life's path. It was both exhilarating and terrifying. I would never ask him to choose between his work and me, she said softly. Then we understand each other, Maxwell said, moving toward the door. For what it's worth, Ms. Steele, you're not what I expected. Is that a compliment, Mr. Roth? A ghost of a smile crossed his face. Let's call it an observation. Sullivan will see you out. He opened the door, revealing Sullivan waiting anxiously in the hallway. As Maxwell passed his son, he placed a hand briefly on his shoulder, the first gesture of affection Imani had seen between them. Sullivan entered the library, his expression a mix of concern and confusion. What did he say to you? Are you okay? I'm fine, Imani assured him. We reached an understanding. What kind of understanding? Sullivan asked suspiciously. He told me about London, about you going back to finish the negotiations. Sullivan ran a hand through his hair, frustration evident. I told him I wasn't going unless he accepted that you're part of my life now. And he agreed to that. In his way. Sullivan took her hands. 2 weeks. That's all. Then I'll be back and we can figure out everything else. Imani nodded, trying to ignore the nagging fear that once Sullivan returned to his world, the world of international deals and private jets, he might see their connection differently. 2 weeks was a long time. Imani, Sullivan said, reading her expression, this changes nothing between us. I'm coming back to you, I promise. She wanted to believe him, needed to believe him. Then go, finish what you started. Shall be here when you get back. Sullivan pulled her into his arms, holding her as if he never wanted to let go. 2 weeks, he whispered against her hair. And then the real story begins. As they rode the elevator down to the lobby, Imani tried to quiet the voice in her head that said fairy tales didn't happen to women like her, that Sullivan would realize once he was back in London, surrounded by people of his own class, that their connection had been temporary, a novelty. What she didn't know was that Sullivan was already planning his return, not just to Chicago but to her, and that in his pocket was a small box that would change everything. 2 weeks, 14 days, and then they would both discover if what they had found in each other was strong enough to bridge 2 worlds. 2 weeks felt like 2 years. Imani threw herself into work at Project Future, staying late most evenings to review scholarship applications or organize fundraising events. Dr. Washington noticed her increased dedication but said nothing, understanding that Imani needed the distraction. Sullivan called every day from London, sometimes twice despite the time difference. They talked about his meetings, her day at work, everything except the uncertainty that hung between them. What would happen when he returned? Would the connection they'd found survive the reality of their different worlds? I miss you, Sullivan said, during one late-night call, his voice husky with exhaustion. He'd been in negotiations for 14 hours straight. I miss you too, Imani replied, curled up on her couch in pajamas, trying to ignore the ache in her chest. How's the Singapore deal going? Almost done. My father is actually impressed with how I've handled things, though he'd never admit it directly. That's good, right? There was a pause before Sullivan answered. It used to be all I wanted, his approval. Now it just feels secondary. To what? Imani asked, though part of her feared the answer. To coming home, to you. His words warmed her, but doubt still lingered. In Sullivan's absence, Rita Myers had published another column speculating that the server girl romance had cooled, with unnamed sources claiming Sullivan was seeing a British socialite in London. Imani hadn't mentioned the article to Sullivan, telling herself it was tabloid nonsense, but the seed of doubt had been planted. Just 3 more days, Sullivan promised. I've booked my flight home on Friday. I'll be here, Imani said, hoping she sounded more confident than she felt. After they hung up, Imani checked her email and found a message from Victoria Lane requesting a meeting the following day. Her stomach tightened. What now? Another offer from Maxwell? proof that the gossip about Sullivan in London was true. She replied, agreeing to meet at Victoria's office during her lunch break, then tried to sleep, her dreams haunted by images of Sullivan slipping away, back into his world of wealth and privilege. Victoria's law office occupied half a floor in a sleek downtown high-rise. The receptionist led Imani to a corner office with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Chicago River. Victoria rose from behind her desk, extending her hand. "Thank you for coming, Ms. Steele," she said, gesturing to a chair. "I appreciate you making time." "Your email said it was important," Imani replied, sitting stiffly. "Is this about Sullivan?" "In a way," Victoria said, taking her own seat. "It's actually about an opportunity that's arisen at Project Future." Imani blinked in surprise. "What kind of opportunity?" "The Roth Foundation, which is separate from Roth Enterprises, has decided to establish a major scholarship fund for students from Chicago's South Side. The endowment would be $10 million, enough to send hundreds of deserving students to college over the next decade. "That's amazing," Imani said, genuinely impressed. "But what does it have to do with me?" Victoria smiled slightly. "The foundation needs someone to administer the program, someone who understands both the challenges these students face and the logistics of educational funding. Dr. Washington recommended you for the position." "Me?" Imani's voice rose in disbelief. "I've only been at Project Future for a few months, during which time you've completely reorganized their application process, increased their funding by 20%, and personally mentored 15 scholarship recipients," Victoria pointed out. "Dr. Washington speaks very highly of your abilities." Imani's mind raced. This was exactly the kind of meaningful work she'd always wanted to do, helping students like her brother access education that would change their lives. But the timing made her suspicious. "Was this Sullivan's idea?" she asked. "Or his father's?" "Neither, actually," Victoria said. "The Roth Foundation is primarily run by Eleanor Roth, Sullivan's aunt. She's been wanting to establish a program like this for years, and when Dr. Washington mentioned your work at a recent fundraiser, things fell into place." Victoria slid a folder across the desk. "The position comes with a significant salary increase, a dedicated staff, and considerable autonomy. All the details are in here." Imani accepted the folder but didn't open it. "This isn't another attempt to manage me, is it? To keep me occupied while Sullivan is busy with more important things?" Victoria's expression softened slightly. "No, Imani. This is a legitimate opportunity based on your qualifications. Whether you and Sullivan continue your relationship or not, this position is yours if you want it." "I'll need to think about it," Imani said, tucking the folder into her bag. "Of course. The foundation would like an answer by next week." Victoria stood, indicating the meeting was ending. "For what it's worth, I think you'd be excellent in this role." As Imani reached the door, Victoria added, "Sullivan returns from London tomorrow, doesn't he?" Imani paused. "Yes, why?" "No reason," Victoria said, but there was something in her tone that made Imani wonder if she knew more than she was letting on. The next day crawled by at an excruciating pace. Sullivan's flight was scheduled to land at 7 p.m., and he'd promised to come straight to her apartment after clearing customs. Imani left work early to clean her already tidy apartment and change clothes 3 times, finally settling on a simple blue dress that Sullivan had once said brought out the warmth in her eyes. At 6:30, her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Check your email. Important info about Sullivan Roth. A friend." Her heart pounding, Imani opened her email and found a message with no text, just an attachment. When she clicked it, a photo appeared. Sullivan in what looked like a London restaurant, sitting close to a stunning blonde woman, their heads bent together in intimate conversation. The timestamp showed it had been taken just yesterday. Imani's hands shook as she stared at the image. Sullivan had claimed he was in meetings all day yesterday. Who was this woman? What else had he lied about? Another text arrived from the same unknown number. "Thought you should know before he feeds you more lies. He'll never really choose someone like you." Hot tears blurred her vision. She'd been a fool to believe that someone like Sullivan Roth could truly care for someone like her. This was probably what Victoria had known and hadn't told her, that Sullivan had moved on, found someone more suitable in London. Her phone rang. Sullivan's ringtone. She let it go to voicemail. Unable to speak to him right now. He texted immediately after. "Just landed. Can't wait to see you. Should be there in about an hour. I've missed you so much." The casual normality of his message made anger flare within her. How dare he pretend everything was fine when he'd been lying to her? She tried calling Jamal for advice, but he was in a lab and didn't answer. Left alone with her thoughts, Imani paced her small apartment, the photo burning in her mind. Part of her wanted to confront Sullivan immediately. Another part wanted to cancel, to avoid the pain of hearing him admit the truth that their connection had been temporary, a pleasant distraction before he returned to women from his own world. At 8:15, a knock came at her door. Imani took a deep breath, steeling herself, and opened it. Sullivan stood there, his face lighting up at the sight of her. He looked tired from travel, his hair slightly mussed, stubble darkening his jaw, but his eyes were bright with happiness. "Imani," he breathed, stepping forward to embrace her. She stepped back, keeping distance between them. "We need to talk." Sullivan's smile faltered. "What's wrong?" Wordlessly, Imani walked to her laptop, opened the email, and turned the screen toward him. Sullivan stared at the photo, confusion crossing his features. "Where did you get this?" "Does it matter?" Imani asked, arms crossed protectively over her chest. "You told me you were in meetings all day yesterday. Instead, you were with her, whoever she is." Understanding dawned in Sullivan's eyes. "Imani, that's not what you think. That's Alexandra Winters. She's the CFO of the company we were negotiating with in Singapore. This was a business dinner." "A very cozy business dinner," Imani said, hating the jealousy in her voice, but unable to stop it. "And conveniently one you never mentioned." Sullivan ran a hand through his hair, frustration evident. "Because it wasn't important. It was a last-minute meeting to finalize contract details. My father was supposed to be there too, but he had a conflict. So you were alone with her? All night?" "For 2 hours with half the restaurant staff around us," Sullivan countered. "Imani, you have to believe me. There's nothing between me and Alexandra. She's engaged to a professor at Oxford." Imani wanted to believe him, desperately, but 2 weeks of doubt and insecurity had taken their toll. "Rita's column said you were seeing someone in London." "And you believed Rita Myers?" Sullivan asked incredulously. "The same woman who's been trying to smear both of us since the night we met? I don't know what to believe anymore," Imani admitted, her voice breaking slightly. "These 2 weeks, I've had so much time to think about us, about how impossible this is. You belong in that world, Sullivan. Private jets and business deals and fancy restaurants, I don't." "That's not true," Sullivan said, taking a step toward her. When she didn't back away, he took her hands in his. "Imani, look at me, please." Reluctantly, she met his gaze. "I've spent the last 2 weeks in boardrooms and 5-star hotels, surrounded by the wealthiest, most powerful people in the business world," Sullivan said. "And every single minute, I was thinking of you, of coming home to you. None of it means anything without you." The sincerity in his eyes made her defenses waver. "Sullivan, someone sent you that photo to drive us apart," he continued, "to make you doubt what we have. Don't let them win." "But who would do that?" Sullivan's expression hardened. "I have some ideas, but it doesn't matter now. What matters is us, you and me. Do you still trust me, Imani?" She looked at him, really looked at him. This man who had upended her life, who had pursued her against all odds, who had defied his father and his whole world to be with her. And despite everything, she did trust him. "Yes," she whispered, "I do." Relief washed over Sullivan's features. He pulled her into his arms, holding her tightly as if afraid she might disappear. "I've missed you so much," he murmured against her hair. "I missed you too," Imani admitted, the tension of the past 2 weeks finally melting away in the warmth of his embrace. When they separated, Sullivan kept his hands on her waist, his expression turning serious. "I need to ask you something important. But first, did you meet with Victoria yesterday?" Imani blinked in surprise. "Yes, how did you know?" "Because I asked her to set up the meeting," Sullivan said. "Not about the job. That was all Eleanor and Dr. Washington. But because I needed someone I trust to check on you while I was gone." "You trust Victoria?" Imani asked, remembering their first encounter when Victoria had offered her money to disappear. "With legal matters, absolutely. She's been the family attorney for 20 years. Sullivan's lips quirked in a smile. "And she likes you, which is rare. Victoria doesn't like many people." "She mentioned the scholarship program," Imani said. "It sounds amazing." "It is. And you'd be perfect for it." Sullivan took a deep breath. "But that's not what I wanted to ask you about." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Imani's heart stopped. "Sullivan, I had this whole speech planned," he said, a nervous laugh escaping him, "about how meeting you changed everything, how you helped me find myself again, how the past few months have been the most real of my entire life." He opened the box, revealing a stunning but understated diamond ring. But standing here now, all I want to say is that I love you, Imani Steele. I love your strength, your integrity, your heart, and I want to spend the rest of my life with you. Not because you fit into my world or I fit into yours, but because together we create something better than either. Tears filled Imani's eyes as Sullivan knelt before her, the ring extended in his hand. Will you marry me? Time seemed to stop. 1,000 thoughts raced through Imani's mind. How fast this was happening, how different their backgrounds were, how much opposition they might still face. But one thought rose above the rest. She loved him. Not Sullivan Roth, billionaire heir, but Sullivan, the man who had seen her when everyone else looked through her, who had fought for her, who had chosen her above everything else. Yes, she whispered, then louder. Yes. Sullivan's face broke into a radiant smile as he slid the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, the diamond catching the light as he stood and pulled her into his arms for a kiss that promised a lifetime of tomorrows. Later, curled together on her small couch, they talked about everything. The mysterious photo sender. Sullivan suspected his father, though he couldn't prove it. The scholarship program. Imani had decided to accept the position, and their future together. I was thinking, Sullivan said, his fingers tracing patterns on her arm. The Roth Foundation has a small office building in the south side, near where you grew up. It's been mostly unused for years. What if we renovated it to house the scholarship program? That would be perfect, Imani said, imagining a place where students like her brother could come for guidance and support. But what about you? Your work is downtown, at Roth Enterprises. Sullivan hesitated before answering. I've been thinking about that too. The Singapore deal is done. It was successful, more successful than even my father expected. I've proven I can handle the big negotiations, the international partnerships. That's good, right? It is, but it's also given me leverage. Sullivan shifted to face her. I told my father I want to restructure my role in the company, less international travel, more focus on local investments and community development. Imani raised an eyebrow. How did he take that? Better than I expected, Sullivan admitted. I think these past few weeks changed something between us. He saw that I could stand on my own, make my own choices, and surprisingly, he respected that. So what happens now? Now? Sullivan smiled, brushing a curl from her face. Now we build something new, together. 3 months later, on a crisp spring day, a small article appeared in the Chicago Tribune's business section. It wasn't written by Rita Myers, who had mysteriously been reassigned to cover suburban school board meetings. Instead, a respected business journalist reported on the opening of the Steele Scholars Center in Chicago's South Side, a state-of-the-art facility dedicated to helping underprivileged students access higher education. The article mentioned that the center was funded by the Roth Foundation and headed by Imani Steele, a rising star in Chicago's non-profit sector. It noted that Sullivan Roth, who had recently been appointed head of Roth Enterprises' new Community Investment Division, had worked closely with local businesses to ensure the center would serve as both an educational resource and an economic catalyst for the neighborhood. What the article didn't mention was the quiet wedding that had taken place a month earlier, a small ceremony in Dr. Washington's garden where Imani, in a simple white dress, had married Sullivan with only their closest friends and family present. Maxwell Roth had attended, his initial opposition softened by time and by seeing his son truly happy for perhaps the first time. Jamal had walked his sister down the aisle, whispering, "Mom would be so proud of you," as he gave her away. Victoria Lane had been there too, raising a toast to two people who refused to let the world tell them where they belonged. And in the back, unnoticed by most guests, stood a middle-aged waitress named Marjorie, invited by Imani in a gesture of forgiveness that spoke volumes about the woman Sullivan had fallen in love with. 1 year to the day after they first met at the Rothwell Museum Gala, Sullivan and Imani found themselves at another charity event. This time, however, Imani wasn't serving drinks. She was the keynote speaker, presenting the achievements of the first class of Steele scholars, 15 students who, like her brother, had overcome significant obstacles to pursue their education. As she stood at the podium, confident and poised, Sullivan watched from the front row, his heart full of pride and love. When she finished her speech to thunderous applause, he was the first on his feet. Later that evening, as they walked hand in hand through the same courtyard where Rita had first photographed them, Sullivan stopped beneath the string lights. "Do you ever think about that night?" he asked. "How different everything could have been if I hadn't noticed you, if that drunk guest hadn't bothered you, if we hadn't stepped out here together?" Imani smiled, squeezing his hand. Sometimes. But then I think maybe it was always supposed to happen this way. Maybe we were always meant to find each other. Is that what faith means? Sullivan asked, referring to the meaning of her name. Part of it, Imani replied. Faith is believing in possibilities, even when the world tells you they're impossible. Like a server and a billionaire falling in love? Sullivan's eyes sparkled with affection. Like two people seeing past labels to what really matters, Imani corrected him, rising on tiptoes to kiss him softly. As they stood together under the twinkling lights, their past and future merging in a perfect moment of presence, a young server walked past with a tray of champagne. She glanced at them, the powerful businessman and the woman who had once been just like her, and for a brief moment, she glimpsed a possibility for her own life that she had never dared to imagine. Imani noticed the young woman's gaze and smiled warmly at her, recognizing the look of someone who felt invisible but dreamed of being seen. The server blushed and continued on her way, but something had shifted in her eyes, a spark of hope, of possibility. That was the true legacy of Imani and Sullivan's story, not just their love for each other, but the boundaries they had broken, the doors they had opened for others to walk through. In a world determined to keep people in their designated places, they had created a new place, one where worth was measured not by wealth or status, but by the courage to be authentically oneself. And in the end, that was the greatest service of all. The end.